Good afternoon and welcome to today's Planning Committee. This is not a public meeting, but a meeting the public can attend. I'm Councillor Susan Durant, Chair of Planning Committee. Before we commence, I'd like to outline the domestic arrangements for the meeting. We are not expecting a fire practice today. If the alarm sounds, please leave the building by way of the fire exit through the doors at the rear of the chamber on my right. When you've left the chamber, proceed down the stairway and exit through the emergency exit on the ground floor. If there is anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located, and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side of the lift doors to call for assistance. The designated assembly point is in the public square in front of Cast beyond the fountain. I'd like to inform members of the public and press that today's meeting will be audio-visually recorded, and by entering the council chamber, you accept that you will be recorded and your images retained and broadcast by the council on its website and on YouTube. If anyone intends to record or film any part of today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting and you only focus on recording those people participating. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent mode. And may I remind anyone speaking in the meeting that you will need to press the large red button underneath the microphone and ensure the red light is illuminated. This will ensure that you are recorded. The meeting is proceeding today on the basis that all members of the committee have read their agenda papers thoroughly and are aware of what they will be considering today. If any member of the committee leave the chamber during consideration of an application, they should ensure they do not take part in the vote on their return, as they will not have heard all the relevant information on that particular item. Thank you. Item 1, apologies. We've got a full house today.
Apologies for Councillor Amy Dixon.
Councillor Anderson.
Amy Dixon.
Amy Dixon, thank you. Item 2, exclusion of the public and press. There are no exempt items on today's agenda. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? No? Fantastic. Item 4, minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 4th of February 2025. Can these minutes be moved as a true and accurate record? Are they moved? And is that agreed? Thank you. Item 5, we now come to the schedule of applications. Application number 1, 22/02834/FULM, which is the erection of 109 dwellings, access, public open space and associated infrastructure at land at Sheffield Road, Warmsworth in Doncaster. Alicia Murray is the planning case officer, which will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. This application is a residential development containing 109 dwellings, 25 of which being affordable units. The site is allocated for housing within the Doncaster local plan with an indicative site capacity of 112 dwellings. The application has been submitted by Taylor Wimpey to develop out the whole allocation under this application. The site is located on the western edge of Warmsworth, situated along Sheffield Road, leading towards Conisbrough. The surrounding land uses are mixed with residential, industrial and agricultural land abutting the site. The site is approximately 3.5 miles towards Doncaster city centre and is connected to the city via the A630. Furthermore, the A630 provides direct links to Rotherham and the wider South Yorkshire region, and to the north-east of the site is the junction for the A1M, which allows connectivity onto the wider highway network. The vehicle access would be off Warmsworth Halt. There would be a pedestrian and cycle access from the site onto Sheffield Road, connecting into the existing cycle lane along the A630 via a new pedestrian and cyclist island. The existing hedgerow along the western boundary with the green belt will be improved to provide a buffer to the green belt beyond, and the existing coppice on the site will be retained. The site itself, so these photos show the site's position of the access off of Warmsworth Halt, which is an adopted road which leads to the public right-of-way into Edlington, and there's a few industrial unit accesses. Warmsworth Halt then leads on to Edlington Lane and the lights at Edlington Lane and the Mill Lane crossroads. So these are just the photos of the site from Sheffield Road. These images, so it's just showing the existing hedgerow that is to be retained and made good in places where required. And then these photos just show the relationship with the dwellings. In terms of general character, the properties on Sheffield Road are predominantly two-storey, and the properties on Ashdale Road, within the proximity of this site boundary, are predominantly bungalows. And then this is the proposed site plan. So this just shows the configuration of the site. There would be two areas of public open space, one being on the eastern boundary and the other on the southern boundary. The access is located to the southeastern boundary with the main spinal road running through the site with a mixture of private and adoptable standard roads leading into the dwellings. The properties on the northern boundary are set off from Sheffield Road but would front it, and there would be dwellings fronting both areas of public open space to allow for natural surveillance. The hedgerow running in the site would be retained except in one area to allow access to a private drive along the western boundary. This hedgerow would sit outside the garden areas to ensure its retention and management by the management company once the site is occupied. The site has been designed to respect the existing landscape, and buffers have been proposed to soften the scheme from the surrounding green belt, along with the retention of a substantial amount of the existing hedgerow. The surrounding area is characterised by brick-built properties, and this character is reflected in the design of the proposed dwellings. The materiality of the development would be brick with concrete roof tiles. The house types proposed offer a variation throughout the development, but overall reflect one another and the neighbouring residential properties. After a series of amendments to improve the design of the scheme, it is now considered to be policy compliant and reflective of the development requirements stipulated for this allocation. The development offers a good mix of house types with 2, 3 and 4 bedroom homes proposed, all of which meet the nationally described space standards and are M42 and M43 compliant. The majority of the properties are two-storey, but to ensure the development is sympathetic to the properties on Ashdale Road, there are bungalows proposed neighbouring the eastern boundary. All the gardens have 10-metre plus steps and meet the required standards, and the development provides a sufficient number of street trees to further enhance the character of this development. The overall design, layout and scale of development is considered to be fully compliant with the Doncaster local plan and its associated supplementary planning documents. So, as we've previously discussed, there is dwellings proposed on the boundary with existing dwellings. So these sections just show that relationship with those that it would immediately neighbour. As you can see, there is a substantial distance between the side elevation of the neighbouring two-storey dwelling on Sheffield Road and the two-storey dwellings proposed. And bungalows are proposed on the plots closest to the dwellings on Ashdale Road, so they do not detrimentally impact the amenity of those residents. The design has been amended to ensure neighbouring amenity is impacted at a minimum. However, it is acknowledged that the residents on Ashdale Road have lived next to an undeveloped agricultural field and would now have dwellings neighbouring them. But the developer has proposed a scheme which is sensitive to those residents and has taken their concerns into consideration. So, as previously mentioned, the development proposes 2 areas of public open space. The area on the eastern boundary has been located to reduce the amount of built form along the eastern boundary to Ashdale Road. This area would include play equipment, It has been designed to provide a separation distance of 20 metres from that play equipment itself, but also includes the addition of a 2-metre high acoustic fence along the shared boundary to minimise any noise impacts from the play area whilst in use by children. In addition, planting will also be provided along the boundary to the play area to screen it from the wider area. The area on the southern boundary would be an area to be used for an infiltration basin and to include the existing coppice area, which is to be retained. This area would be landscaped and a path provided around it. There are no objections from Yorkshire Water or the lead local flood authority or the Environment Agency in respect to the drainage proposal. The development does require the removal of 4 Category C trees and several Category U trees, but these are outlined as low value and will be replaced by several new trees within the landscaping master plan, with taller, heavy standard trees proposed in the areas that are visible to the public. And the landscaping will be secured via planning conditions, including the provision of management and maintenance of the landscaping areas and planting. In terms of the access, it would be along the southeastern boundary. There's been a number of objections raised regarding the increase in traffic on Edlington Lane, and a preferred access was for Sheffield Road. However, the road safety reasons and access off Warmsworth Halt has been proposed here. The transport statement submitted has surveyed the trip generation on the highway network, and the impact is not deemed severe for all scenarios and is therefore compliant with paragraph 116 of the NPPF. Objectors have also raised concerns over the validity of the traffic data. Our transport planner has reviewed the validity of the surveys, and it is considered that reasonable to take forward the June 2021 data and the September 21 data, which are both within acceptable ranges. A capacity assessment has been undertaken for the signalised junctions at Edlington Lane, Sheffield Road and Mill Lane, and with the exception of the Edlington and Mill Lane signals, which would be near capacity by 2033. So therefore a contribution will be secured by a Section 106 agreement to revalidate these signals to ensure capacity is maintained, and this would make the impact of the development acceptable. Further concerns have been raised about the potential increase in using Cecil Avenue and Wrightson Avenue as rat runs. Our Safer Roads team have been consulted and highlighted these roads have a 20-mile-per-hour limit with adequate speed calming measures, and these measures are considered sufficient enough to deter the through traffic, balanced against the roads being part of the public highway network, which by default must be publicly accessible. Additionally, there are no significant injury collision patterns at these junctions, and there is a very good long-term road safety record. The proposal includes the provision of a pedestrian and cycle crossing island on Sheffield Road to allow for connectivity onto the existing active travel route along Sheffield Road. These works would be provided via a Section 278 agreement, but a planning condition is proposed to ensure these works are completed prior to the occupation of the dwellings. The addition of this crossing will improve the connectivity for the residents of Sheffield Road onto the active travel network in this area. The ecological surveys that have been completed for the application showed the significance of this site for the bat population by way of use of the Warmsworth Pike Tunnel for hibernation. Therefore, there is a need to mitigate the development by improving the security of this tunnel entrance from predations from common household pets and human disturbance. Following thorough investigations by ecology consultants and structural engineers, the mitigation proposed is to replace the grille on the entrance to the tunnel and the erection of security fencing within the area of the coppice which houses the tunnel entrance. It is acknowledged that this scheme is lesser to what was deemed necessary by South Yorkshire Bat Group, but when considering a number of factors, this is the best option to ensure the entrance is improved so the bat population can still utilise this tunnel for hibernation purposes without causing other structural or health and safety risks. The surveys and mitigation put forward by Taylor Wimpey are deemed acceptable by the Council's ecologist, subject to a number of conditions. including a 10-year monitoring condition for the tunnel entrance to ensure it remains in a good condition without any vandalism. This is the condition that was being agreed to by Taylor Wimpey, and it is proposed that this is carried forward into any contractual agreement with the management company which would take on the public areas of this development. In addition to the protection of the protected species, the development would provide 35% net gain on habitat units and 60% net gain on hedgerow units, therefore being fully compliant with the minimum 10% biodiversity net gain. It is acknowledged that the residents have objected to the impact of the development on local wildlife, but the surveys and mitigation proposed are considered satisfactory, and the development is considered to be in accordance with Policy 30 of the local plan. The scheme is considered to be fully viable, and all contribution requirements will be met via the signing of a Section 106 agreement, which will include the provision of affordable housing, education contributions, travel bond, MOVA signals revalidation, the infrastructure delivery plan contribution, green belt compensation improvements, and the provision of the public open space on site. In summary, this proposal is to develop an allocated housing site within the Doncaster local plan. The scheme is considered to fully comply with the Doncaster local plan and will provide the full suite of financial contributions. The development would provide 109 dwellings towards the housing land supply required within the plan period. The site is in a sustainable location and is reflective of the character of the area and will overall provide an uplift to the site in terms of its on-site landscaping and improvement to the linkages to the wider area. The impacts of the development during construction stage will be mitigated via the submission and adherence of a construction management plan, and the developer has tried to address all the concerns of the local residents through the submission of various amendments to improve the relationship of the site with the neighbouring residents, and additional public consultation has been carried out. Therefore, this application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and the signing of a Section 106 agreement. There are 3 requests to speak, one from the planning agent, one from Councillor Cole as a local ward member, and another one from a local resident in objection to the scheme. And there are no other pre-committee amendments. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alicia. Right, we've got Joe Hardy, a member of the public who has requested to speak in opposition to the application. If you'd like to come down to the front. All right. There's a, you see the seats there? There, look, where it's got speakers. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute the microphone when you've concluded your submission, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Hi. First of all, my name's not Joe Hardy. I'd like to speak on behalf of Joe Hardy. My name was, I thought, on the application, but it doesn't appear. My name is Lee Newsom, also a local resident. And my question relates to the biodiversity net gain. This recent report, entitled Lost Nature, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, undertaken by the University of Sheffield, makes it clear that developers are not implementing many of the legally binding ecological mitigations and enhancements that they are required to. In a survey of 42 developments, a high percentage of the habitat and species enhancements were found to be missing or incorrectly implemented. So in light of this report, how confident is Doncaster Council's Ecology Officer that these promised mitigations and enhancements will be delivered correctly? And I can give some headline figures if I do have the time.
We are limited to the time we have, so we only have the 5 minutes in total.
It will only take...
It needs to be within your 5 minutes, thank you.
After a survey of 42 varied housing developments, the following summary was found. Hedgehog highways, 83% were missing. Invertebrate boxes, 100% were missing. Bat boxes, 75% were missing. Reptile refuges, 85% were missing. 75% of bird boxes were missing. The woodland edge seed mixers were 82% missing. And the woodland edge plug plantings, 73% were missing. Trees on site, 39% were either dead or missing. Native hedges, 48% were missing. Wet grassland, 60% was missing or damaged. And finally, wildflower grasslands, 59% was sown incorrectly or damaged. And that's it, thank you.
Thank you. Do any committee members wish to ask any questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much for your submission.
Thank you.
Councillor Phil Colwell, members requested to speak in opposition to the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute your microphone when you've concluded your submission, and we'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, there's been an awful lot of objections to this planning application. You'll have seen that in the documentation, but I have to say most of those objections were at the early stages. I think the documentation you've got before you and the scheme design is about the 5th or 6th iteration of the plan. Certainly a lot of the material objections that the Residents Association and myself have raised have been met by the developers. No planning application is perfect, but I probably agree with the Officer Alicia Murray, who's done a fantastic job on this proposal in making sure that this scheme is policy compliant. I particularly welcome the 25 units, affordable housing units within the scheme. And can I say that, so in terms of the number of scheme designs that have been needed to get to where we are today, I would just say to Taylor Wimpey could do better, but at least we are where we are. I would also, the Residents Association, look forward to seeing the Construction Environmental Management Plan. They're really keen to be able to comment on it. Their concerns are things like noise during construction. They want the silos and site officers placed on the far side of the site from where the existing boundary with the neighbouring Warmsworth Holt Ashdale Road development is. And that's entirely understandable, rather than, for example, being placed on the area which is set to be a play area, a bit of green open space, which is on the boundary with the existing housing. So noise management's a key aspect. I think we look forward to seeing more details on biodiversity net gain. I do think this is an emerging area of policy, but the council, I know, has got a lot of expertise in this, and I'm very confident that we'll get very satisfactory outcomes. From the outset, the developers were very keen to have this site entrance and exit through Warmsworth Holt, bringing it onto residential roads rather than onto the Sheffield Road, which is more of an arterial road to the A1. That's a disappointment to us, but they seem to have satisfied officers that their transport management plan works. I very much welcome the Greenbelt compensation. There is a reference to Conisbrough, and I think some of the Warmsworth residents immediately said, why is all the money going to Conisbrough? There is a whole series of grasslands that lie between Warmsworth and Conisbrough Viaduct, which is not quite in Conisbrough, really. Conisbrough Viaduct along the Sprotbrook Gorge, and I think they're due for enhancement, and that's very welcome. On a matter of detail, and sorry to raise it in the committee, the eastern boundary fence, which lies between this new development and the existing Warmsworth Holt Ashdale Road site, there is clear breaks in the fence. We don't know why. We would much sooner it was continuous. We're also very keen to see the build-out rate as quickly as possible. The sooner these houses are built, the better as far as the residents are concerned. And also, going forward, our message to Taylor Wimpey is that the Residents Association are very pragmatic. They didn't come here today because they don't propose to oppose it at this stage, but they are very keen to work with the developers and have a good dialogue. And I think that actually makes sense from the developers' point of view at all. And also, the Residents Association and myself, we think the bats have not done bad out of this, by the way. So I'm sorry that we haven't kept the bat group happy with the proposals, but I think the council has made every effort and its ecologists to make sure that the Butterbus Tunnel hibernating spot for bats is protected, and that's all welcome. So I am fully assumed that this plan will be approved today. It does appear policy compliant. We are grateful for the large number of changes that have been made so far, and we hope that, subject to the details of construction management, that actually this scheme can develop in a way that works with the residents and doesn't find the developers butting heads with the Residents Association. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cole. Do any committee members wish to ask Councillor Cole any questions in relation to this submission? No? Okay, thank you. Do we have Claire Plant? So Claire Plant is the 1947 agent acting on behalf of Taylor Wimpey and has requested to speak in support of the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the red button when you want to speak, and again to mute the microphone when you've concluded, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. We're the agent on the application, and I'll keep this brief, but we just wanted to support the officer's recommendation and also to recognise the work of the officers in getting to this point, as acknowledged by Councillor Cole. So we welcome the dialogue that's happened during the application. As Alicia said in her presentation, the application is an allocation and it is Taylor Wimpey's intention to progress and deliver the site, hopefully swiftly, Councillor Cole. We have been in discussion with the council for quite a period on this scheme, and we're happy that it's now reached committee. I think there's a number of benefits brought forward by the scheme, not least the provision of affordable housing as part of the development. We have sought to deal with the constraints and opportunities that are provided by the site, a number of which have been covered in officers' reports, so I won't go over those again. But in particular, we have had a lot of dialogue on the highways arrangements to make sure that they're acceptable, not just to the Highways Authority, but also to Highways England as well. And we've had detailed dialogue with the council's ecologists, particularly in relation to the Bat Tunnel, but also acknowledging residents' concerns about BNG, etc. So we appreciate that's an evolving area, but we will comply with those planning conditions, and they're quite detailed. So we fully expect to be able to work with the council going forwards. There has been extensive public consultation, both as part of the allocation of the site originally. We've then held 3 consultation events during the application, and the public have been consulted by the local planning authority. So we hope that people feel like they've been able to raise their concerns, and we are happy to continue working with the Residents Association as well. Ultimately, this is a housing site. It will contribute to the delivery of housing in line with government objectives.
Apologies.
Not to worry. And it will contribute housing as part of the local plan requirements. So we welcome the officer's recommendation and the dialogue that's taken place, and we'd encourage you to support the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Do any of the committee members wish to ask Claire a question? Emma?
Hi. It's regarding the bats and the term monitoring, because obviously there's a large difference between 24-hour CCTV and somebody checking it on once on it in 10 years that you'll be responsible for it. So I'd like some clarification on what you're planning on putting in place for the monitoring of the bats.
So the planning condition that's proposed requires a maintenance and management plan to be put in place. So that will be submitted to comply with the planning conditions. So the details will be agreed with officers before we progress with that regime. It will also form part of the management company for the site. So it will be something that the residents are involved in the active management of through the management company as well. So it's an improvement on the current situation where it's currently unmanaged as far as we're aware.
Do we have any other questions from committee members? No, thank you for your submission. Committee members will now go into debate. Does any member wish to comment on the report or ask the planning case officer a question? Councillor Stapleton, then Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. Probably for the last time as well. You never know. I've got a few questions because there's something I'm struggling with here. When did this application become compliant? What date? And am I correct that the petition, it's not a typo, it was 2 years ago on the 4th of the 4th, 23?
Oh, it's been ongoing discussions for 2 years. It slowly became compliant over those 2 years, sort of knocking off issues as time went on. The longest running issue was an objection with National Highways. That was only overcome a few weeks ago. It was more of an internal issue of working out contribution requirements towards the infrastructure delivery plan. This is the first application that's required a contribution to that. So it's basically we've been trying to work out how a contribution is created and what level, and making sure that it's proportionate and reasonable for the scale of the development. Which we've now done, and the sum of money is agreed with National Highways, but the design and everything was probably all ironed out towards the end of last year.
Yeah, this is where I have a problem, and as you know, I always question when things come in front of the committee why they're here, and I'm struggling to see why this is in front of us. I know Councillor Cole called it in. I'm not understanding why it was called in, because obviously from his comments we're all very positive about the work the council has done on this. The petition was 2 years old, so I'm just sort of challenging really, why has this been brought in front of us to be dealt with instead of just being dealt with by officers?
So throughout the application process, when there's been significant changes, we have gone back out to members of the public and to local members and the parish council, and quite a few objections remained during all that time. So in my view, it still had the public interest.
Yeah, thank you for that. It doesn't really say that in the report. If it had done, I probably wouldn't have needed to ask the question, but thanks anyway, appreciate it.
I think we've also known that the size of the development above a certain want it to come to committee to make sure that members do have the opportunity to speak. But thank you for that. Councillor Cox?
Thank you. It's an easy one, Alicia. Where's village boundary?
Well, the village boundary now includes the allocation, but before it was literally the last house on Sheffield Road. So it was Greenbelt land, and now it's encompassed as part of the allocation. So the village boundary is the last house in terms of the settlement, is the last house on Sheffield Road, and then the properties on Ashdale Road. In terms of the parish boundary, I'm not sure. I couldn't answer that.
How did the village boundary move? Due to this application, or what was the process?
Well, it was allocated within the local plan, so it would have gone through its examination and then taken out of the green belt in that capacity and allocated within the residential policy area under this allocation.
So just for clarity then, there was a full consultation on the village boundary being moved, not just the green belt being taken out of green belt, but moving the boundary.
I wouldn't be privy to those conversations because I wasn't part of the local plan adoption. So,
do we have any other questions? No? Okay, therefore, is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to conditions and the signing of the 106 section agreement? That's been moved. Do we have that seconded? Can we have a show of hands of those in favour, please? And that's unanimous. So therefore, that has been granted. Application number 24/01815/3 FUL, a single-storey extension to accommodate 6 classrooms and 1 nursery facility, external works to include a new vehicular access collection point of Plumpton Park Road, amended plans received including enlarged application site at Hatchellwood Primary Academy, Plumpton Park Road in Bessica, and Richard Craig, the planning case officer, will introduce this item. Please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Dave Richards. I'm not as good looking as Richard Greig. He's on holiday today, that's why I'm just presenting his application. This application is before you because City of Doncaster Council are the applicant. There's no speakers registered, although we do have colleagues from Education as requested. The pre-committee amendment sheet has been updated to reflect two things. Firstly, the plans and conditions to the application have been updated to reflect the latest reports. So that's an agreed construction environmental management plan and also a remediation statement concerning land contamination. This involves changes to conditions 3, 4 and 5 to reflect these latest details. Essentially, part of that is to agree the construction traffic management plan within the application rather than leaving it to condition, given some of the concerns that have been raised. And secondly, since the pre-committee briefing yesterday, an addendum note has been produced, which is attached to your sheet there, and that's from the education team, and that provides more detailed advice on demand for primary school places in this part of Bessica. In summary, the education team have confirmed that Hatchellwood Primary School is already at full capacity and is increasing demand due to local birth rates and also recent housing development. If you look through the data, there's actually only 4 available places across a number of primary schools. In terms of our role as officers, obviously the local planning authority will continue to request developer contributions for education and application to help fund these improvements, as officers have been doing at the nearby Manor Farm development. And really the takeaway from this note is that the extension of to Hatchellwood is essential, and essentially we need it right now. Just turning to some of the key proposals. I'll briefly go over these. So we've got a single-storey extension, as you can see, to the northeast of the main building, a nursery access collection point to be created off Plumpton Park Road, just on the side entrance there near the trees, resurfacing and widening of the access, an increase from 41 to 50 car parking spaces, a fence to separate the extension, if you like, from the car park, a new bin store, 11 new trees, and biodiversity net gain of at least 10%. In terms of the wider context, there's been a number of objections relating to traffic congestion, principally at drop-off and pick-up times, which is understandable. However, the evidence submitted with the application shows that the local network does operate at an acceptable level. Why is that? Well, the school's location is ideal for expansion. It sits within a residential area. Many people live within a reasonable walking distance, and the site is well connected in terms of public transport and suitable footpaths and so on. This includes a pedestrian crossing point on Bawtry Road between Plumpton Park Road and Warren Lane, which drops down to the Manor Farm development. I've just included a Google image on the bottom right hand of that screen there just to show that. Following Chair's briefing yesterday, our highways team have confirmed that they are actually looking to source a traffic warden to man this location, but so far been unable to find a suitable candidate. The assessments demonstrate that the network can accommodate the expected increase in staff and pupil numbers, which is significant. They confirm the available of on-street parking on Plumpton Park Road, which is relatively wide and can accommodate a good number of traffic, or a good amount of traffic, sorry. The expansion of the car park to 50 spaces has been assessed through on-site surveys and found again to be sufficient, taking into account the location where there's reasonable alternatives to arriving there by car for staff. And finally, obviously, there's no objections from the council's highway team either. So in short, there is short-term congestion at school times, which is a normal occurrence across the country, but this doesn't mean that the site is unsafe. The NPPF requires a severe impact in all scenarios, whereas this is not the case here. According to the assessments, the local network functions in all scenarios, and there's no evidence of a severe impact. Turning to the extension itself, single-storey, linear design, using buff brick, metal cladding, and glazed features to complement the existing school building. It's an improvement, in my opinion, on the design appearance of the existing school. Concerns have been raised about potential noise on neighbouring properties. However, I believe it's well distance from neighbouring boundaries there to avoid any issue. It's located at least 35 metres away from the nearest residential property and doesn't introduce any new outdoor activity beyond what's currently there already. As I mentioned, there's a construction environmental management plan to ensure that dust, noise and construction traffic is controlled to minimise disturbance as well, and that's been agreed in advance of the application being brought to you today. And finally, no objections from environmental health either. There has been a number of ground contamination surveys which confirmed that there are fibres or trace elements of asbestos within the site, but this is to be fully remediated by trapping them and covering them in a clean cap barrier system, and that's again agreed through the application in line with good practice. Gas risk assessment confirms no gas risks on the site, and I mentioned the remediation strategy will ensure that the site is suitably remediated. The environmental health officer obviously has got no objections, and it will remain safe for use, for school use. I've gone over biodiversity already, but that's 11 new trees, meadow grassland and shrub planting controlled in the northern part of the site, and the drainage strategy involving soakaways, again to the northern boundary, have been agreed with the drainage team. So in summary, the principle is acceptable, fully supported. The highways impacts have been fully addressed with mitigation on site through increased parking. There's a balanced approach to the design. It's well integrated into the site and the context. In terms of the overarching need for it, well, clearly in line with the council's broader responsibility to provide school places, this meets a recognised need and is given substantial weight, and the recommendation is to grant. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dave. I will now ask the committee members if they wish to ask any questions. I've got Councillor Cox and Councillor Beach.
Thank you, David, and thank you for this application. I've got to ask education. I mean, we've seen now that obviously David said we need it right now. What procedures put in place to trigger this build, and why are we saying right now when we haven't had something in plan moving forward? We know that all applications have an education need. We know that there are applications not so far away that have had provision for education, but it's not been followed through. Could you please explain to me how we've got here and how we've got to this point in time?
Good afternoon. Neil McAllister, the City Centre Learning Provision Manager, Councillor Cox. So thank you for your question. In terms of the local authority's responsibility, we are responsible, as all local authorities are, for school place planning across the country, and we have a methodology that we use for those purposes. We submit an annual return to the Department for Education, and we liaise closely with our colleague at the Department for Education about future provision. The process that we use is we use a basis of housing developments, i.e. local housing developments we're aware of, and we also take into account the birth rates in the local areas, so that each child is assessed to be allocated a catchment area and will generate an additional pupil in an area. So essentially it's the birth rate and then the additional housing details. So they're the two core factors that we take into account. Planning and timing of developments is always very difficult. The maturity of local developments hasn't generated a need for new additional school places until recently. We've identified the need. We have been working on this process for around, I would say 12 months so far. So we're about 12 months into this process so far. And we have started to make internal changes to the school to accommodate some short-term measures for additional pupils this coming year where necessary. Timing is difficult, and do recognise that it is putting in places when we need them. Essentially, if we were to expand a school without the demand for pupil places, it would be a difficulty for the school that's operating, in terms of they'd be running a much larger building, but because their funding is based upon pupil-led funding, they would need the pupils on roll.
I mean, you know that we've addressed this over, I think, 8 years now, and we know that applications have come forward in and around the area. That it has been mentioned that education need is there, but some of the education provision has been put in schools further away. Such as one that went into Brampton, the education, there's no places in the primary schools in Brampton, in Oakley, they're all full. Now, it's great to see, and thank you very much. But what concerns me is that we know that there has been a parcel of land that could have been used. That's obviously, well, hopefully going to be used moving forward. What concerns me is that we have been saying this, all councillors say it, that we need education. Why are we not future-proofing things? Why are we not getting
Councillor
things
Cox,
in place
we need
to do it?
We're not discussing future proofing first.
No, it's this application.
Relative to this application.
It is this application.
So more so, can you make that link, please? Because the link isn't clear.
The link is, can we have a more permanent crossing from Warren Park to the school? Please. Yeah, we want more crossing. We want the school, obviously, but we want the council to understand that there is a big need for education. And please listen to people. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cox. Councillor Beach.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As Councillor Cox has sort of vaguely just touched on what I wanted to say. As regards crossing the main road, I heard that, yes, they're looking for a crossing attendant, but it came to mind that it's the same situation in Tollbar. On the A19, whereby a lot of the young children go to the first school.
We're not discussing the toll bar. Can we relate to this application?
Yeah, but what I
please?
wanted to say was
let's keep it to this application, please.
They have, they have a crossing warden and pedestrian crossing. Could we not have at the pedestrian crossing control so that push button control so that if you can't get a warden, there is some safety for the young people.
Councillor Stapleton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm really looking forward to Councillor Beach starting her new job as a crossing patrol warden. I just got a question here about the amended plans state receipt including an enlarged application site. Obviously, I've got I've got that already, and the other one with the thing. What concerned me is I read earlier in there was something mentioned about, I think it was to do with noise, and a comment was made about that it could be moved to another part of the site. Now, obviously, I know that site is when I'm looking at this map, is quite a larger site that's not included on that one. My concern is, it appears when I'm reading this as if there's no control over exactly where that building's going to go, because it appears to say earlier in the report, and I'm sure it was on noise, that it could be moved to another part of the site. But obviously, if you're going to do that, that has to be in the planning application, as far as I'm concerned. It's going to go where it is on there. But I just want clarity, because you're putting into this amendments to the agenda saying amended plans received including an enlarged application site. But I haven't seen a site of this large application site.
So that refers to the red line going around the application site rather than where the building specifically is going to go. That's not changed. The reason the red line was extended was to accommodate the remediation works within other parts of the site so that we could deal with it as a comprehensive scheme, but the building itself hasn't changed location. That's as per the presentation that you've seen.
So the enlarged application site is that there that I'm looking at on the screen?
Yes, that's correct.
So if that is the red line boundary you're talking about, why have I got an amendment? Because you've already put that into the paper. That's in the papers already. So what I'm confused about is, what is this amended, including an enlarged application site?
apologies. That was during the course of the application that was amended as I say, to accommodate that wider area for the remediation, but not in terms of the developable space. So if that's confusing in terms of how we've reported that, then apologies, but the plans haven't changed in terms of where the building's going at all.
Yeah, it's confusing because if that was an amendment that was made ages ago, why is it not in here already? That's my point I'm trying to make. You've put an amendment to the agenda as we've walked in the room. It's stated that there's an enlarged application site. I'm now being told, well, that was done a while back, which I'm not disputing, that's fine. But then the question is, why is it not in our papers? That's the question I'm asking. Because when you're looking at earlier and it's talking about, because of noise, it can go in, we can move the site. And then you're reading this, it does come across a little bit as if, say, somebody's trying to create a bit of a loophole here. So in the event of they can't come back to, or we can't come back and say, hang on a minute, we didn't approve this. Because it's like, well, no, you did, because do you see where I'm coming from with it? It's just not clear.
I think we appreciate that, Councillor Stapleton. You've highlighted its confusion, how it's been messaged over, and we can take that going forward as well. So thank you very much.
That's
no,
absolutely fine.
That.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions? Do we have any? Therefore, do we have any member that wish to comment on the report to ask the planning case officer a question? Councillor Cox.
Could I move that we grant this with a condition to put in a crossing in? Please.
We might want to bring the highways officer in on this. There would have been an assessment as to whether or not any mitigation would have been required, and had that felt necessary to make this development acceptable in planning terms, then that would have been included, and technically that's not considered necessary, but I'm sure Andy Wiltshire can expand on the reasons for that.
A crossing point purely for the school to the Manor Farm estate, is that what you're trying to imply in terms of a crossing point? So where is the crossing point that you're trying to get constructed, implement?
It's mentioned in the application, Andy, that a crossing point is put in for young people to cross Boaty Road.
There is a crossing point already. I think it was the school crossing patrol warden that is the problem. So there is a crossing point, but it's not manned because they can't get anybody to do the patrol.
So nothing can be done to support residents in crossing the road to get to school. So, sorry, Andy, but have we got to wait until a child gets knocked over before we can do anything?
You could say about that, about any crossing point on any road, Councillor Cox. So, no, you just don't wait. But if there is a need, and there has been a need for a school patrol crossing, unfortunately, nobody's applied for the job or can't. If you're insistent on one being provided, then I think the quote is that it will be around £150,000. But that's not my decision in terms of whether the need is required at that point. So if you are wanting to suggest that a crossing point is put in, then that's what you wish, then by all means.
It is obviously what I'd wish.
Whether it's required as for the planning permission, I'm not quite sure it is. That's how I would say, is that there has been a need in terms of a patrol crossing warden put in place, but it's been identified, not a crossing point, a signalised crossing point. If you want one of those, that'll be £150,000.
Chair, the only other point I would make is that we might be talking here about pre-existing issues that are occurring rather than any mitigation that's required to make this development specifically acceptable in planning terms, which is what we'd need to be looking at in terms of any conditions imposed here. And I think the conclusion is that that wouldn't be a reasonable requirement to make this development acceptable in planning terms. Dave, I don't know if you've got anything more detailed to say about the specifics of the assessment.
Yeah, so two things. Following Chair's brief, I spoke with colleagues who deal with traffic wardens, and because you picked up on that in the briefing, so I wanted to look into that in a bit more detail, and that's how I began to understand that, in fact, they had identified that location for a crossing, for a traffic warden, back in a couple of years ago now. And my understanding is part of that, they'd be looking at sort of road safety side of things at the same time as well. And I'm sure, as Andy says, they'll be looking at various scenarios, but firstly, in terms of this application, the assessments have reviewed obviously the accident data in the locality. There's no significant safety concerns already, you know, with how it's currently operating. So when I was discussing this with colleagues in highways, they were saying, you know, that's something that could look into, but it's a difficult junction because there's multiple junction points there, isn't there? It might not be a case of it's a crossing, but there's other scenarios widening the central refuge area and so on. But that, as Emma says, falls outside the scope of this application. This application does not require it, and it would fail the test to actually try and apply that to this application. But I know offline, separate to this planning application, I'm sure they'll be, you know, looking at all the options for various locations in around the area if there's going to be increased pedestrian movements from, you know, as a result of the extension. But my understanding is that there isn't that requirement from the survey that was done in 23.
I get it. I'm obviously upset because firstly, through this application, we've obviously been pushing for something in another area that's come to ending up where we are, I think. But for how do we end up, right, we've got a duty of care to the children, haven't we, as an authority? So suggesting that we put a crossing in to make sure that the children and people, residents that can cross the road safely, Borty Road, we cannot, a need's been obviously shown because there is a need for somebody, a traffic lollipop person, to be there. Can't get anybody. I mean, who's going to stand in the middle of Borty Road with a lollipop thing? But then when we see, and I'm sorry, Chair, we've got applications such as a park near the hospital that's now got a pedestrian crossing. What need was there for that when we can put that in, but then we can't do it to support young people? I am really, really confused now.
Thank you. I think the key point that you're making there, and you used a very important word there, to suggest that they look into putting a crossing in place is different to requiring them one through the terms of this planning permission. So the tests wouldn't be met in terms of us making a requirement on this development to put a new crossing in place by virtue of the evidence that we've got before us on this application. But that's not to say what we couldn't do in granting permission is impose, say, an informative, which isn't binding, but strongly encourages those conversations to happen and those opportunities to be explored. I think that's as far as we could go. We couldn't require it or withhold permission on that basis, but at least we're setting out that we see that there might be an opportunity there to explore.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions to officers? No? Therefore, is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to conditions? Is there a move for the recommendation, please? That's been moved, that's been seconded. Can we have a show of hands in favour, please? That's unanimous, so that has been passed. Thank you for that. Item 3, application 24/01654/FUL, change of use of retail unit, Class E, to a 12-bed, 15-person HMO and rear extension at lower and ground floor level at 1 Church Street, Conisborough, Doncaster. Emily Cartwright is the planning case officer who will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. The item before committee is for the change of use of an existing retail unit, Class E, to a 12-bedroom, 15-person house of multiple occupation and a rear extension at 1 Church Street, Conisborough. The application site is located within the main settlement limit and the town centre of Conisborough. Sited to the north of Church Street, the mid-terrace building fronts Church Street. Close to the junction with High Street to the south and Castle Street to the east. Located within the Conisborough Conservation Area, the site is opposite the Grade 1 listed St Peter's Church. So just moving to some site photos, starting with the left-hand image. The building subject to the application comprises the 3-storey mid-terrace cream-rendered building with a vacant hairdressing shop at ground floor level. The adjoining 3-storey property to the west, 3 to 5 Church Street, is also within the applicant's ownership and comprises a tattoo shop at ground floor level and a HMO above. The second image to the right is taken from High Street to the south of the site and gives context to the locality. To the left you can see the Grade 1 listed church, St Peter's, and available on-street parking along High Street. So the image to the left is taken the image to the left is taken from the junction of Church Street with High Street and shows the context of Church Street street scene. There's a mix of commercial and residential properties along here. Parking along this stretch of Church Street is prohibited by double yellow lines, and then the image to the right shows the street scene to the east of the junction along Castle Hill. On-street parking is available along this section. So we've got 2 images here taken from the rear of the property. The image on the left shows the 3-storied annex that then steps down to the 2-storied annex, which is in poor condition currently. There's also an existing redundant fire escape to the site that would be removed. Following on to the next site photos, the first of the 2 images shows the existing yard to the east side and rear, with the Castlewell car park and development to the immediate north, and then the second image shows the existing and proposed bin storage area. So the roller shutter door will provide easy access to Church Street on waste collection days. So here we've got the proposed site plan. The red line plan identifies the application site, and it also annotated with the secure cycle storage that's proposed, bin store and the yard to the side and rear. The key considerations will be the principle of development, design and heritage impacts, residential amenity impacts, antisocial behaviour, highway safety, parking, waste and recycling. So moving on, we've got the floor plans. These are proposed. So the proposal would result in the creation of 3 double bedrooms, each with ensuite, and a further 9 single bedrooms with en-suites. 2 communal kitchen diners will be created, one at ground floor level, which would serve the ground and lower ground level rooms, and then a second one would be created for the first floor level and the second floor level rooms. All of the bedrooms would exceed the 10 square metres guidance by the Housing Act 2004, and the communal facilities provide 3.6 square metres per person, which also exceeds the council housing standards of HMOs of 2 square metres per person. So moving to the proposed elevations, the key external changes to the front elevation would be the removal of the existing shop front at ground floor level, which would be removed and replaced with a single sliding sash window and door, both of which would be finished with header and sill detailing. Moving up to the first floor, the existing windows would be removed and replaced by lengthened openings to match the adjoining building. And then moving to the rear, the gable end of the rear of the two-storied annex is in particularly poor condition and would be removed and replaced by a small 1 metre deep extension. 3 new openings would be created to the rear. One would utilise an existing bricked-up opening, and then there'd be a further 2 openings. Again, these would be with sill and head detailing, and also an existing fire escape will be removed. So this map here identifies licensed HMOs in the locality. So the grey dot to the centre of the screen is the proposed site, and the yellow dots identify the licensed HMOs. Please note this is not comprehensive, it is an indication of the licensed properties. So of note is the existing 9-bedroom, 14-person HMO adjacent to the site. This has been licensed since 2006. It's within the same ownership as the application. This has been run for almost 20 years without any complaints and has a number of long-standing tenants. So we've received 13 objections on this application from members of the public, and these can be summarised as proliferation of HMOs, loss of retail, highway safety, namely an increase in traffic and lack of parking, impacts on amenity, namely noise and antisocial behaviour, design and conservation impacts, and the additional pressure on local services. There are 2 outstanding consultee objections, one from South Yorkshire Police Design and Outcrime Officer, and the second is from the locality manager. 2 objections have also been received from ward members. So the principle of development. Concerns have been received relating to the loss of retail and the proliferation of flat conversions and HMOs in the locality and pressures on local services. The existing retail unit is vacant, and policy 23 of the local plan supports residential uses in town centres. Given the edge of town centre boundary location, the application site, and the adjacent residential uses, the local plan officers have raised no objections to the change of use, and the principle of residential use is deemed acceptable in this case. With regards to the proliferation of HMOs, a review of council records indicates that there is only 1 existing licensed HMO on Church Street, located at 3 to 5 Church Street. Accordingly, the proposal would not result in more than 2 HMOs side by side, the sandwiching of a house or flat between 2 HMOs, or more than 2 HMOs within a run of 20 properties on one side of the road. In view of this, the proposal is compliant with requirements of policy 9E in respect of the over-concentration of HMOs. Respect of additional pressure on local facilities, it's not considered that the scale of development would be of significant harm. So design and heritage. There have been concerns that the proposal would impact on Conisbery's historic centre and the significant historical buildings. The proposal is considered to bring an unused building into use, that, and the works proposed would provide an overall enhancement which will preserve the character and appearance of the subject building, the surrounding street scene and the conservation area. No heritage objections have been received by the council's conservation officer, and the proposal is considered compliant with design and heritage impacts. Residential amenity. The proposal complies with the HMO standards and will provide an acceptable and good standard of accommodation for future residents. Objections have been received in relation to noise impacts from the proposed HMO. It's considered that the level of activity involved in travel to and from and for leisure and shopping purposes would not be substantially different to the trip patterns of individuals in one large property. All party walls, internal walls and floors would be checked and upgraded to satisfy building regulations in respect of soundproofing. It's considered that the amenity of existing neighbouring land uses and occupiers would be maintained, subject to good management. In terms of antisocial behaviour, we've received a number of objections with the safety and security of local residents and antisocial behaviour as a whole. It's acknowledged that there is local concern that HMOs have negative social, economic and environmental consequences. However, most of these are related to a situation where there's a local concentration of HMOs. The community in this case would not be imbalanced by a local concentration of HMOs. And whilst there is an existing HMO adjacent to the site, as mentioned before, it's well managed and it has been for a period of 20 years. Further to this, there's insufficient evidence to substantiate concerns over antisocial behaviour, and the concerns raised by South Yorkshire Design and Art Crime Officer relate to incidents that have occurred at another HMO on Elm Green Lane. It's of note that this HMO on Elm Green Lane is somewhat different to that that's proposed today, in that it's run by the Wraparound charity, which helps the vulnerable who may be struggling with homelessness, addiction and rehabilitation. So highway safety and parking. We've received a number of objections, mainly relating to the pressure on existing limited parking provisions in the locality and increasing traffic and speed of vehicles and general highway safety concerns. There's no parking proposed as part of the proposal. However, the proposal site is considered to be within a sustainable location, within walking distance of the train station and a number of bus stops, as well as shops and other services within the Consbury Town Centre. There's no policy requirement for parking, and the Council's highway officer have raised no objections in respect of highway safety and parking provisions. It's also worth noting there is on-street capacity within a realistic walk of the site in this case. Waste and recycling. The proposal includes a bin storage area within the enclosed underpass. Bins will be stored in the underpass and presented along Church Street on bin collection days only. Whilst no objections or conditions have been raised or requested by the Council's Waste and Recycling Officer, it's considered necessary to impose a waste condition just to ensure that there's effective waste management on site and to protect the amenity of both the future occupants and the existing neighbouring residents, as well as just protecting the appearance of the street scene and surrounding area. It's also worth noting there are 3 trees sited close to the site, 2 cherry trees and a large self-set sycamore trees. The sycamore tree does actually have a provisional TPO on it, and it's built within very close proximity to the 2-storied rear annex building. The applicant has provided an arborist report, and this concluded that whilst no trees are required to be removed, to facilitate this particular development, it is recommended that the sycamore tree is removed regardless of the development due to its unsuitable location. The Council's tree officers have been consulted on this. They've raised no objections to this, and they've said they would raise no objections if a separate TPO application was to be submitted. Drainage. An objection was received with regards to the lack of drainage information. The proposal will utilise existing outlet connections discharging to the existing main drain system, and it's considered that, based on the existing use, the limited scale of the development, this drainage method is acceptable and compliant with policy. Archaeology. As the application is situated in the heart of the historic core of Conisbrough, there's potential for archaeological deposits. The South Yorkshire Archaeology Service has been consulted on the application, advised that given the small scale of the extension and limited nature of groundworks, archaeological monitoring of groundworks would comprise suitable mitigation in this case, and that can be secured by a pre-commencement condition. And finally, in summary, the representations have been considered and the positive aspects of the proposal outweigh any material planning considerations weighing against the development. The proposal is considered to provide an acceptable and fully policy compliant form of development. As such, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions. There is one request to speak from the local ward member, Councillor Pearson, and thank you.
Thank you for that, Emily. We've got Councillor Ian Pearson, ward member, who's requested to speak in opposition to the application. This is now your opportunity to address the committee for up to 5 minutes. Please press the large red button when you want to speak and press again to mute the microphone when you've concluded your submission. I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Are we working? Yes, you're on. Thank you. I'm amazed about this application. The rear of the building has historic value as the old sweet shop. There is historic records for archaeological matters relating to it because bodies were buried in and around that area historically. So I am, as I say, I'm very shocked in the comments about the rear of the building and the work being done. I don't know about anybody else, but walking on a footpath 2 foot wide is a pretty scary thing. And that's what will happen when people start walking up the road from the location of the old sweet factory. There has been a car driven through the front window of a neighbouring property within the last 2 years because of traffic issues. And the owner of that property had to move out for many months. There is insufficient parking. I find it quite hilarious that somebody thinks a 2,000-year-old road that's 12 foot wide can take on-street parking next to a church which has no footpath on the other side of the road. And the whole area around it, 2 HMOs, these the Fox, there's Elm Green Lane, there's the ones on Station Road, there's a children's care home very close by as well, there's a children's nursery and what have you, with no restrictions. Sadly, we don't have Jessica's law in this country because I do worry about what residents will be using this property. You may say there's been no reports in 20 years. Rather weird considering we had an alcohol banning in Conisbrough for about 7 years until the law changed, and we've been asking for PISPO, a public space order, to stop drinking ever since for the area from where we're talking about all the way into the village. And the behaviour of drug taking and antisocial behaviour, the police have had great concerns about, as you will be aware from the comments from Inspector A.D. Luscombe, about the night time and weekend, particularly in the summer, that goes on the public open space about, 40 yards from where this location is. The fact there is no parking bays anywhere around there other than those that are used by everybody else going shopping and what have you, where are we going to put another 13 cars? There is no space. As I say, we've had double yellow lines added to part of the area outside the Fox because the buses were getting stuck there for 20 minutes because somebody had parked there. Particularly dustbin lorries, strangely enough, or recycling lorries, when they get to where we're talking about. I think a greater comment on the recycling and what have you, somebody needs to look at. And double yellow lines really ought to be outside the property, because if somebody parks there, the bus service to Sheffield and Doncaster will be blocked. We've had numerous incidents of car crashes as well in that corner because it's such a blind corner. So I would ask the committee really to refuse this and seek better strategies. If it wants to be an HMO, and I've no problem about the building being converted, it needs to be converted in keeping with a village that the church was built in 750. So its long history is important, and that is within the conservation area. And I would say again, we used to bury people in the area historically, either from the castle or the Romans, or later if you were a pauper, so they couldn't put them in the church. So please, take action to stop this disruption of a historic area.
Thank you for your submission, Councillor Pearson. Committee members, do we have any questions for Councillor Pearson? Charlie?
Regarding the response from the locality manager, said there's concerns in the area regarding street drinking, adults gathering and substance misuse issues, with joint action plans to address the issue with CDC in South Yorkshire police currently run. Are you aware of these incidents and how bad they are?
I am very much aware of it. We've actually had the police numbers increased by 50% in the last 3 years. We have constant visits from the bike team to do it. We have a certain number of prolific shoplifters who have banning orders now in that area. We have other people that have got social agreements not to come into the village from the HMO that's just up the road, which seems not to have been mentioned, which is the now called Sly Fox. We've had nighttime patrols from everybody and their grandma trying to get the kids off the street. We've had up to 60 children in summer incidents as well. And so led to such an extent that we've had to have CCTV cameras twice now. We've won 2 bids to cover that area and to deal with the muggings and assaults and what have you that have taken place within 50 metres of this property. So I'm going to exclude the drug, the £1 million drug finding down the road. Somebody might say it's a bit far, but it's in walking distance, so you can see there is quite a lot of county lines involvement, including the PSB and the Dennerby riot lot. So we are well and truly aware of it, and the police have tried very hard to do it, but there's 9 of them, and that's
Thank you
it.
for that, Councillor Pearson. Do you have a supplementary question, Councillor Hogarth? No? Councillor Stapleton.
Councillor Pearson, I've listened with great interest in your comments about the state of Conisbrough. I'm really surprised you didn't mention the Ukraine war, because we're talking about a building that has been a HMO for 20 years without complaint. Whatever else is happening in your ward, to me, is not really relevant. What I am concerned with is your comment about Jessica's Law. I know what that means. Do you want to explain a bit more how you think Jessica's Law should be applied to this HMO?
We have 2 schools and nurseries within 1,000 metres of that property. And I think that that's what we should have in this country about any HMO and how close they are to schools and the residents that are aligned there.
I'm sorry, Councillor Pearson, I found that the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard a councillor say. You're intimating that anybody that lives in a HMO is a sex offender, because that's what Jessica's Law is about. I'm disgusted that you even said it, and I'm not even going to talk to you about it anymore. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? No, therefore, committee members, do you wish to ask any questions to the case officer?
Yeah, it's, well, it's 3. All on page 109. Designing out South Yorkshire Police can no longer support the application in any form. Now, to me, that's quite clear. Now, for public health, as the HMO is an area of high deprivation, health impact assessment was requested. Following submission of this, public health requested further clarification on a number of matters. How satisfied, are they now satisfied with it or not? It doesn't go into that. And again, the locality manager, which I've met, they don't seem to be in favour of it. So the amount of official bodies who are sort of against it, so it seems to say, well, hang on a minute. I can't understand why it's been recommended for approval.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. With regards to the Design and Art Crime Officer, South Yorkshire Police, they actually did confirm there is a low crime rate in the area, but the antisocial behaviour concerns that they had related to the HMO that was made reference to, I think, on Elm Green Lane. And as mentioned, the use of that is somewhat different to the HMO that we're looking at today. And we've got no evidence to substantiate those concerns that the proposed development itself would increase any forms of antisocial behaviour. So we do feel it is compliant with policy with regards to that. Your second point, I think, was with regards to
Public health.
Public health. Yeah, so they essentially were asking for additional information, such as is there sufficient space for dining within the kitchens? Would there be internet proposed to the applicants? There was various things, and the applicant did provide that additional information, so that was satisfactory. And then your third point, I think, was in reference to
Locality manager.
Locality manager. Again, that was mainly to do with antisocial behaviour. And as we've covered off in the report, we do think it, you know, we've got no evidence to suggest that this would increase antisocial behaviour in Conisbrough.
They did also make reference to an influx on parking with the bus route as well on their comment.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of parking, as mentioned earlier, it's a sustainable location. There's no policy requirement for parking provisions in this case. So it is policy compliant.
Councillor Cox.
Charlie's done it.
Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Chair. Proposal and background 2.3, you've used a word that I really like, fenestration. However, members of the public and other members of the committee might not know what that means. But going on from there, we're talking about the external development of the site. What I can't see, or it's made clear, because obviously from the images we've seen, we know the building's owned by the same owner and it's got two different colour schemes. Is there a plan to create one colour scheme across the entire building, or is it going to be left as two separate?
So I'll just take us back to that image of the street scene. So is this the one that you're referring to? Yeah, there's no actual proposal to remove the render, so it is as this. So the main amendments would be to the shop frontage and to the fenestration detailing, so it's to get the openings to match the adjacent property, just so it's more in sync with the adjacent property. So the brick would remain on the left and the render to the right, but there is a mix in the area of render, brick and stone properties, so the materiality is considered acceptable in this case.
I get that. I understand that completely. However, because you mentioned the word fenestration, I'm assuming that the window changes are going to be on the right-hand side. So if you're doing the window changes anyway and doing that work, could it not be a condition that that render is removed? So, we've got to remember this is in a conservation area. So it would be feasible, I think, to put as a condition that that render is removed as part of the fenestration work. Therefore, the building would then match, and it'd probably be more acceptable in the way it looks in the area.
Yep, thank you, Councillor. That wasn't actually put forward as part of the proposal, so when we were assessing it, that wasn't considered. Our conservation officer has reviewed the plans and they were satisfied that what was put forward is acceptable and it preserves the appearance of the conservation area.
Councillor Mounther.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very interested to hear what Councillor Ian has said about the fact that the historic part of it. It's interesting to know that. But when I look at page 115, 930 paragraph and 932 there, I am working my socks off in my ward and other wards, so the whole of the borough have the same issue with ASB and drugs, the whole lot. But when a police officer comes and says they can't support this any other way, we've got to start listening to the local people. As far as I'm concerned, I will object to this with a shadow of doubt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mounther. Do we have any other? Councillor Pickering, it's lovely to see you.
Yeah, just to sort of
cover off a little bit here what Councillor Mouse has just said and Councillor Hogarth. I've got to say from my point of view, if it's a proposal that the police cannot support, I'm afraid it's a proposal that I cannot support either. So I'd just like to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just come in briefly on the matter of antisocial behaviour and the comments by the police, what they're talking about in making their representations as experiences that they've had elsewhere. That doesn't automatically mean that they will experience the same thing in respect of this use of this building. As Emily's explained, there's no evidence to support that that will happen here. The management of the HMO next door has been operating, as Emily says, for a significant period of time without any issues. You can completely understand the concerns of the police in terms of any potential risk that there might be about kind of further drains on their capacity, and they mentioned that specifically in their representation as being a concern to them. But there's no specific evidence that this use of this building would exacerbate those issues specifically.
Councillor Hogarth.
Yeah, can I just, the information before us on page 109 is quite clear. Decided out, South Yorkshire Police can no longer support the application in any form. That's quite clear. No, oh, but it doesn't apply to this. That is what information we've been given. And going on that, I have very grave concerns about this.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Chair. I can't say I particularly agree with some of my colleagues sitting here. I'm more inclined to agree with officers. We've got to take this into consideration, not running around Conisbrough like chicken licking expecting a ceiling about to fall down. We've got a building that has been a HMO for over 20 years. The people that live in that HMO are not sex offenders or drug addicts or rioters or any other thing we want to tag them with. They are abiding people that for 20 odd years have lived in that building. All that's happening is that the gentleman that owns the building is looking to expand his business, buy a few extra rooms. I really don't see where all this scaremongering is coming from. So I support the officers completely on this, and I don't see there's any reason to refuse it.
Thank you for that.
And just one further point, if I may, Chair, thank you, is obviously there's a separate licensing regime that these units will be covered by. So there'll be a requirement for the operator to adhere to certain management plans to make sure it operates in an acceptable way. That's separate to planning, but it's worth having in your minds that those things are covered off by separate legislation.
Councillor Cox.
Has this been to licensing yet? I don't think it has it?
Could you just repeat that, sorry?
Does the HMO have a licence?
Existing, no.
No. So it's got to go through that process?
That's correct, yes.
So that would give the police chance to say, we either do or don't. So I think it'd be good if the police could give some more clarity to their comments moving forward. Whether we hang on a bit with this one, don't know, but it's not for me to make that decision. But I think it would be good if we got further clarity from the police.
I think generally how this would work is that licensing require the planning process to have been completed before they go through the licensing process. So there wouldn't be any reason to delay determination of this application before it goes through that process. Obviously, one of the principles of the licensing regime is to make sure that there won't be an increase in crime, and for the police to kind of feed into that. So that's absolutely their opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Mounsey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Steve makes a good point, but at the end of the day, the police have made a comment now, and they won't change it, what Councillor Cox suggested. They will do the same, say the same words again. So therefore, I am backing them again. I will object to this because the public can tell you what's wrong with that place. Councillor Pearson has told you exactly. He knows better than anybody else in this room what's happening there. The police are backing him up there. This cannot go ahead, and I will object to it. Full stop.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mounsey. Does anybody else wish to speak? No? Therefore, is there a proposal to grant planning permission subject to conditions? Is there a mover? That's been moved. Is there a seconder? All those in favour? All those, that's 3. All those against? Can you put your hands up clearly so they can see to make the notes? Therefore, that decision has failed. We need an alternative reason for rejecting this application.
Police
Councillor
will
Hogarth.
not support it. It's concerns from the locality manager. Public health, we haven't got anything back, and we don't know one bit regarding them. But again, the police will not support it in any form. And again, there's concerns from the locality manager. Yep.
Therefore, what Councillor Hogarth is saying that he objects to the application based on the report from South Yorkshire Police and the locality manager and their observations. Is that correct?
Sorry, Chair, can I don't... Oh, were you going to jump in, Emma? Were you just going to... I just wanted to clarify, but if you're going to do it, then probably...
Yeah, thank you. You might want to still jump in, Stacey, but what we're looking at is the policy backup for any grounds of refusal that you might be seeking to imposed here. So if you wanted to have a look at policy 47, which deals with safe and secure places, this talks about creating safe and accessible environments where crime and disorder and the fear of crime do not undermine quality of life or community cohesion. So it goes on to say developments will be supported which are designed in a way that reduces the risk of crime and the fear of crime by ensuring that they create certain built environments. And so we would be talking about the nature of the use, the concentration, the proliferation of people, and the lack of community cohesion as a result of that, and the fear of crime that ultimately brings about, contrary to the requirements of policy 47.
Okay.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's what the police are saying in making their representations to us. They don't necessarily align it to what the policy requirements are, but that's the closest link to a policy in terms of what they've been saying.
Can I just say, the police are the experts. We employ the police as the public, and they're saying they're not going to support this in any form. So to me, they've got the knowledge in that area, and I think we should listen to them. Yeah.
Therefore, you're happy for them to use the policy 47, safe and secure places and proliferation of people. Is that what you're wanting to use, Councillor Hogarth? Yeah. Therefore, is that seconded? Can we have a show of hands for that proposal? Have you got that? Those against? And abstentions. Therefore, that has passed. Item 6 is Planning Enforcement Quarterly Report for December 24. The report's for information only. Does any member wish to speak on this? Councillor Beach.
Yes, it's just an update. I'm looking for it. Page 137, Chapel House, Moss Road. This picture needs updating. The fence along the front has been removed. The gate is still there. What you can't see on the picture is the adjoining property to the left has put up on top of the wall. I suppose I thought it was wrought iron, see-through iron fencing. Whether the other property intends to do the same, I don't know, but it looks very strange at the moment. We know fence, but the gate's stuck up, but the fence has gone.
Sorry, Council, I can give you an update on that. There's been a recent planning application determined from Sarah for that site, and there's been a lot of back and forth, and I think she's in a position where she's been able to make good, and because Sarah also lives in Ascot, she's been monitoring it. So if you want a bit of an update on that, might be worth just dropping a call to Sarah. Sarah Dodds in planning, that was the planning case officer. There's a planning application being pending for some time and a lot of negotiations back and forth on it. So just might be worth a quick call with her. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions, queries? Members, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the business at today's meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and input, and I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.